Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today's lecture celebrates the life and work of the greatest goldsmith who ever lived, Peter Carl Faberge. Everyone knows a little about his famous imperial Easter egg collection for the Russian Tsars, but today we're going to revisit his early life and influences before we get to know the Easter egg story. Peter Carl Faberge was born to Gustav and Charlotte Faberge on the 18th of May, 1846. Carl's grandfather had fled France during the 18th century persecution of the Huguenots after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes by King Louis XIV, and had settled in Parnu, Estonia, where Carl's father Gustav was born in 1814. The name Faberge comes from the old French word faverie, meaning a manufacturer or craftsman, from where we get the modern word fabricate. In 1842, on completion of his training and having been awarded the title of Master Goldsmith, Gustav opened a basement jewellery shop in St. Petersburg, and Carl was born there 4 years later. Gustav had taken the opportunity to move his family business to St. Petersburg in order to ride the wave of public interest in Russia's second city, the Venice of the North, as it was dubbed. Peter the Great had succeeded in just under 150 years of creating a cosmopolitan city to rival the ancient and historic seats of London, Paris, Rome and Madrid. St. Petersburg was now on the aristocracy's list of places to be seen, and what better a place for a talented goldsmith to sell his creations. Young Carl Faberge was afforded a good education, the culmination of which was a European tour, on which he studied the craftsmanship of jewellers working in Paris, Dresden and Florence. On completion of his studies, he took over the family business in 1870, at the tender age of just 24 years old. There are very few photographs or images of Carl Faberge. He was a famously private man, but here we see a painting of young Carl Faberge commissioned by his father. Gustav Faberge had studied under Johannes Keibel, one of Europe's most esteemed jewellers. When he opened his new boutique and workshop, his name was already well known to the Russian royal court, and he was already well regarded as a favoured jeweller. This is an example of Gustav's work. As you can see, it's very elaborate, and it would have suited the well-heeled society figures of 19th century Russia. So you would have thought that a young man like Carl Faberge may ride his father's coattails for a few years as he learned the family business. He had inherited a well-respected company with an influential, wealthy clientele. So what he did next came as quite a shock to the workforce, but ultimately made his name even more well-known. Carl Faberge believed that the design of a piece of jewellery had an intrinsic value. Prior to this thinking, a goldsmith would buy raw materials, make the piece, work out how much to add as profit, and offer the item for sale. However, Faberge put a price on his design, and as such became the world's first designer jeweller. The bourgeoisie and aristocracy shopped with Faberge not because they wanted a new pair of earrings or a bracelet, but because they wanted a piece made by Faberge. He also began making much more delicate pieces of jewellery, befitting a new generation of young, affluent society ladies who did not want to wear the ostentatious pieces worn by their mothers and grandmothers. Here on the left we see one of his floral studies, in this case a lily of the valley, which you will see replicated in many pieces over his lifetime. And on the right, a piece from the mid-1890s. You would say that this piece has all the attributes of an Art Deco piece, but the Deco movement didn't start until the 1920s, so already Carl Faberge was thinking way ahead of his time. Carl found the new direction in which he was taking Faberge was making him wealthier and more popular, so he purchased a purpose-built new showroom and workshop at 24 Bolshaya Morskaya Street in St. Petersburg, just down the road from his father's old shop. The shop was perfectly located just a few hundred metres from the Hermitage, the winter palace of the Romanovs, and it said that when Faberge displayed his new pieces, between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. every Friday evening, the well-to-do Russians would be waiting to see what was on offer. Faberge designed a shop unlike anything ever seen before. The salon, pictured here, was huge, designed to accommodate not just his wealthy patrons, but also their various maids, drivers, valets and bodyguards, who would accompany their employers on these shopping sprees. The second floor housed the workshops, and this grainy image is just one of a handful of photographs in existence. Faberge was a hard taskmaster. He paid his staff a basic salary and then a commission for each completed piece. It's said that when a Faberge inspected a piece, he kept a rubber stamp of approval in one drawer of his desk and a large hammer in the other. If the piece did not receive the stamp, it was destroyed with the hammer, and the goldsmith went away with nothing and was forced to start again from scratch. This is a testament to the incredible quality demanded by Faberge. Faberge was also a very shrewd businessman. He did not believe in tying up money in dead stock, so if a piece had not sold within 12 months of manufacture, it was removed from sale, taken apart, and remade into something else. The gentleman seated at the right of this picture with the moustache is Henry Wigstrom, one of Faberge's 7 workmasters, who along with Michael Perchin was responsible for the majority of Faberge's imperial Easter eggs. He spent many years of his later life in a mental institution, the condition seemingly brought on by the pressure of completing these incredible Easter gifts for the Tsars, in particular the mosaic egg of 1914, considered by many to be the most complicated jewel ever made. Faberge had some business with the royal household of the Romanovs by the early 1880s, but it was one of his sculptures rather than his jewellery which attracted the interest of Tsar Alexander III, and Faberge was invited to the palace for the first time. Faberge had been experimenting with sculpture since the 1870s, when he was still a young man. Since an early age he had a fascination with flora and nature, and here he immortalises that. Using rock crystal to make the vases, then adding various alloys to gold to make it green here on the left with another lily of the valley study, and then blue gold leaves on the right. We take rose and white gold for granted today, but it was Faberge who perfected this alloying process first in the 1880s. One of Alexander III's first commissions for Faberge was a set of snuff boxes to be made using enamel. Faberge had dabbled with enamelling in previous years, but this commission set his creative juices flowing once more. Snuff was extremely popular and restrictively expensive, so only really favoured by the elite. In fact, Count Philip Yusupov, who was famously involved in the murder of Rasputin in 1916, once said, "Unless a gentleman has one of Faberge's snuff boxes for every evening of the year, he cannot be counted as a true gentleman." There are many different types of enamelling, from basse tile to pliqué azur and champlevé, most perfected by the French, but the most difficult was always considered to be guilloche, meaning engine turning. Hot enamel is used to flood engine-turned surfaces, giving a 3-dimensional finish. Even today, with computerised drying processes, success rate is only 1 in 5 pieces. In Faberge's day, it was 1 in 20. It was this piece, however, which changed the destiny of Carl Faberge forever. In the 1870s, a group of wealthy aristocrats had taken to treasure hunting, amongst them Count Sergei Stroganov. They had discovered a hoard of Scythian treasure at Kerch on the Crimean Peninsula and presented it to Tsar Alexander II. The Scythians were a roving band of nomads from the Caucasus who were feared for their ability on horseback and with a bow and arrow. They were famed for carrying all their wealth in the form of gold, and this hoard of treasure was buried approximately 400 BC and had lain undisturbed ever since. This lion's head bangle, which is now displayed in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, formed the centrepiece of the collection, being virtually undamaged after over 2,000 years of burial. In the early 1880s, the French government asked if they could borrow this piece for an exhibition in Paris, but the curator in St. Petersburg decided it was of far too much value to leave Russia, so he had several jewellers make a replica which could be shown in Paris. Amongst the companies asked to make the replica was Faberge, and when inspected by a panel of experts, none of them could correctly identify which piece was original and which piece was the copy. Alexander III was so impressed with Faberge that he granted him a royal warrant in 1884, making him goldsmith to the imperial crown, which allowed him to stamp the Romanov crest upon his work, thus affording him even more publicity. The Romanov crest originated in the Byzantine dynasty and was used by the Holy Roman Empire before being adopted by the Russians in the 13th century. It features one eagle facing east and one facing west, symbolising the bridge between Eastern and Western civilisations. Interestingly, even though the House of Romanov no longer exists, the Communist Party did not revoke Faberge's royal licence after 1917. So today, Faberge remains the only jeweller to hold a royal Russian warrant, and it's still an official title today. In the same year as Faberge was granted his royal warrant, the Tsar gave him a commission which was to become world famous and unrivalled as a jewellery collection, the Imperial Easter eggs. Alexander was married to Maria Fedorovna, formerly Princess Dagmar of Denmark. As a reminder of an ornamental egg in the Danish crown jewels, which she had cherished as a child, Alexander commissioned Faberge to make an egg ornament for the Easter celebrations. The giving of Easter eggs dates back to the death of Christ. Once Christ had ascended to heaven, Mary Magdalene presented herself to Tiberius Caesar, holding out an egg to show Christ's resurrection. Tiberius mocked, saying that Christ was no more risen than the egg that she held was red. With that, the egg turned red with the sacred blood of Christ as a sign from God. And so the story starts. The first egg, the hen egg, was presented at Easter 1885. It was a translucent white enamel over 18-karat gold. Within the outer was a smaller gold egg forming the yolk. Within this was a golden hen which opened to reveal the surprise which all Faberge eggs contained. In this case, a miniature model of the imperial state sceptre and a ruby pendant. The sceptre and pendant are missing, but the rest of the egg is now displayed in the Links of Time Museum in St. Petersburg, having been purchased by Victor Veskelberg from the Malcolm Forbes collection in 2004. Thereafter, Faberge was tasked with making another egg, more elaborate than the last, to present to Maria at Easter. Unfortunately, every other egg made from 1886 to 1890 was lost during the Russian Revolution, and their whereabouts remains unknown. Of course, we don't have time to discuss all 50 eggs here, so I've picked a few of my favourites to talk about. By 1891, you can see Faberge's work was far more intricate as he presented the Pamiet Azova egg. The egg was created to commemorate the sea journey made to the Far East by Tsarevich Nicholas, soon to be Tsar Nicholas II, and his brother, the Grand Duke George, on the battleship Pamiet Azova, meaning Memories of the Azov, the Azov being the small sea adjacent to the Black Sea between the Ukraine and Russia. Made from one solid piece of jasper, the egg is set with diamonds and one large ruby closing clasp. The ship model itself is entirely made of 18-karat gold, sat upon a slice of natural aquamarine. The rigging and masts all collapse so as the ship can fit back inside the egg. This piece is displayed in the Army Museum in the Kremlin in Moscow. In 1894, we have the Renaissance egg. Not the most elaborate or interesting of the collection, but the story of this egg is fascinating. It was the last commissioned by Alexander III. He died in November of 1894 and was succeeded by his son Nicholas, the last of the Tsars. After the Russian Revolution, it was purchased by Armand Hammer, famous for founding Occidental Oil in the USA. Being of Russian heritage, Hammer was able to purchase many Romanov treasures at very low prices from the new communist government, and he spent almost a decade in Russia between 1921 and 1930. He purchased the egg for very little on account the surprise was missing. Rumour had it that the Dowager Duchess Maria Fedorovna smuggled the surprise out of Russia after the revolution under her hat, and it was perhaps used to pay a border guard for her safe passage. However, new research throws up another possibility. This is the resurrection egg, which for many years was considered not to be an original Romanov egg, because it bore no identifying numbers, but was stamped with Michael Perchin's name as workmaster. Faberge made eggs for many other wealthy Russians, including several for Barbara and Alexander Kelch, wealthy St. Petersburg industrialists, and it was thought for many years this was one of those eggs. There is no record of this egg being commissioned or presented to the Romanovs, and there is no actual surprise inside the egg, unlike all the others. Also, it was purchased by a London dealer in 1922 from, quote, an aristocratic Russian lady, now believed to be Maria Fedorovna. It was only in 2004, when the Russian oligarch Victor Veskelberg purchased the Forbes collection, that the Renaissance egg and the Resurrection egg were finally displayed together for the first time in almost 100 years. Immediately the similarities were evident, the same enamelling and decoration, but when the Resurrection egg fitted perfectly inside the Renaissance egg, they realised that the egg and surprise had finally been reunited. Both pieces are displayed in the Links of Time Museum in St. Petersburg. With Tsar Nicholas now on the throne, he decreed that from now on 2 eggs would be presented annually, one to his mother, the Dowager Empress Maria, and one to his new wife, Tsarina Alexandra Fedorovna. To commemorate his inauguration, the coronation egg was designed. Started in 1894 and only completed in 1897 when it was presented to the Tsarina. Using a unique blend of pigment, the enamel colour exactly replicates the robes worn by the Tsars since Catherine the Great on their coronation day. The coach alone took 4 goldsmiths over 3 years to complete. An exact replica in every detail of Catherine the Great's coach from 1793, the original was used to bring Tsarina Alexandra to Ouspensky Cathedral for her coronation. The royal coachmaker George Stein was seconded to Faberge during the period to advise on the details of the carriage. During its manufacture, Oriental silk was no longer available, so it's said that Steins cut some small pieces of silk from under the original carriage to finish the replica. This piece is also displayed in the Links of Time Museum in St. Petersburg. The following year, 1897, Faberge created the Lily of the Valley egg. By this time, Nicholas was giving Faberge far more carte blanche with the design of the eggs, so Faberge took the opportunity to use his love of Lily of the Valley to create this egg for Alexandra Fedorovna. Using pink guilloche enamel and seed pearls from the Volga, the surprise is revealed by pressing down on the miniature state crown to reveal a triptych of Tsar Nicholas and his first 2 children, the Grand Duchesses Olga and Tatiana. This piece also is displayed in the Links of Time Foundation in St. Petersburg. By 1900, Faberge had been experimenting with automatons. One of his first completed was the Trans-Siberian Railway egg, commemorating the completion of the train line from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg. The egg is presented atop 3 gold griffins and is surmounted by the Romanov crest, and has the route of the railway etched in silver around the egg with precious gems marking the stations. Stored within the egg is a clockwork train, handmade in 18-karat gold, with diamond headlights and ruby taillights, and carriages filled with small trunks of diamonds, pearls and emeralds. A train set fit for a king, if ever there was one. This egg is currently displayed in the Armoury Museum in the Kremlin in Moscow. Of course, whilst this commission for the Tsars was ongoing, Faberge still had countless other customers. His success was such that by 1905 he had over 600 goldsmiths in 8 workshops in Moscow, St. Petersburg, London, Rome and Paris, making jewellery, tableware, cigarette cases and much more. One of his most lucrative collections was that of miniature eggs to be worn as necklaces and bracelets. Again targeting a younger clientele with smaller pieces, this somewhat backfired on Faberge, but in a good way. It became a mark of social standing and wealth to see how many of Faberge's eggs could be worn on a necklace or bracelet, with rich ladies buying these eggs in their hundreds and wearing them all at once. Inadvertently, Faberge had invented the charm bracelet, which remains as popular as ever today. With the 1906 swan egg, once again Faberge surpassed himself. A gift for the Dowager Duchess Maria on what would have been her 40th wedding anniversary. The swan is the Russian symbol of family and the bond of marriage. It's in mauve enamel and was chosen to complement Maria's sitting room in Alexander Palace, still known today as the Mauve Room. The swan was also automated, and with the turn of a key it would spread its wings and each individual feather moved separately. It's considered to be one of the most intricate automatons ever created. This piece was sold several times over the years, including to King Farouk of Egypt, but for the past 70 years has been in the possession of the Maurice Sandoz Foundation in Lausanne, Switzerland, and has not been seen in public since 1971. In 1908 we have the Alexander Palace egg. This is one of several eggs containing a model of a palace as a surprise. In this case, the palace favoured by Catherine the Great as a summer palace, rather than Peterhof. Green enamel studded with rubies and sapphires, and the foliage around the model palace made using green gold. This is the palace which, just 9 years later, the Tsar and family would spend their last days in St. Petersburg. Having fled the city, they spent several weeks here before being arrested and imprisoned in Ekaterinburg. Interestingly, when this piece was designed, it was to be enamelled in red. However, the Tsar made public the fact that his young son Alexei was a haemophiliac in 1907, and from this date onwards Faberge didn't make another egg in red for the royal family as a mark of respect for their son's illness. This egg is displayed in the Kremlin Armoury Museum in Moscow. As an Easter gift to Dowager Empress Maria in 1912, the Napoleonic egg commemorates the Russian victory over the French at the Battle of Borodino in 1812. Green enamel and double-headed eagles adorn the outside, while inside are images of Tsar Alexander I and his generals, painted by the miniature artists from the Russian village of Fedoskino. In St. Petersburg you will see a large column in Admiralty Square behind the Hermitage. This is the Alexander column, built of red granite to commemorate the famous battle. Atop the column sits the Angel of the Neva, the protector of the city, and you will see that she's looking directly west, straight towards France, as a sign to the French not to attempt another attack. This piece currently resides in the New York Metropolitan Museum as part of the Matilda Geddings Gray collection. Considered by many to be the pinnacle of Faberge's genius, this is the mosaic egg from 1914. Hand-cut platinum sections hold a myriad of faceted gemstones to create this intricate design. As the framework had to be made first, every small gem was faceted to fit into a particular spot, making the process tremendously time-consuming. This is the egg which, it said, began the descent of workmaster Henry Wigstrom into insanity. Such was his frustration at trying to finish the piece. The surprise inside is a carved cameo featuring the 5 Romanov children as they would have been in 1913. Faberge used only indigenous gems in the creating of his pieces. While French in origin, he was a staunchly patriotic man and only used imported gems as a last resort. One particular favourite of Faberge's was diopside, a dark green Siberian gem which he favoured over emerald because it was much harder and had a higher refractive index, thus making it sparkle more. The green gems you see in this piece are Siberian diopside. This piece was purchased by King George V of England after the Revolution as a gift to Queen Mary. It's now the property of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II of England. Here we have the 1915 Red Cross egg, which was given to Alexandra to commemorate her work with the Red Cross during the Great War. It depicts Alexandra, 2 of her daughters and other Romanov family members all in their Red Cross uniforms, and is inscribed with the words from the Gospel of John, chapter 15. Greater love hath no man than this, to lay down his life for his friends. This is the penultimate egg made for the Romanovs, and reflecting the austerity of the times, the shell on this egg is made of silver, not gold or platinum, as in the previous 47 eggs. This piece is in the Lillian Pratt collection in Richmond, Virginia. And here we have the final creation by Faberge for the Romanovs, the steel military egg from 1916. Again, reflecting the austerity of the time, this is the only egg made with no gemstones and in a non-precious metal. The shell casings which form the 4 legs of the egg are actual recovered shells from the Eastern Front. The surprise is another image painted by the talented miniaturists from Fedoskino, showing Tsar Nicholas II and his son Alexei inspecting plans on the battlefield. This is one of only 10 Easter eggs never sold by the Bolsheviks and has been displayed in the Kremlin continually since the Russian Revolution of 1917. On the right-hand side we see Carl Faberge's drawings of the 1917 creation, which was never finished, showing Atlas carrying the world aloft his shoulders. The surprise was to be the Standard, Peter the Great's flagship of the Baltic Fleet. Of all 50 eggs, only drawings of this egg and the Napoleonic egg survived the revolution. Of course, we all know the story from there. Lenin and Trotsky led the Bolshevik revolt in October 1917. The battlecruiser Aurora fired one shot to signal the storming of the Winter Palace, and 300 years of Romanov dynasty had ended. Nicholas had already abdicated in the March that year and was under house arrest with his family in the Ural Mountains prior to their murder in 1918. Faberge, fearing for his life due to his close associations with the Romanovs, fled Russia, through Latvia and Lithuania to Lausanne in Switzerland. The Bolsheviks took control of the company and set about dispersing the assets to fund the new Communist Party. Faberge died in 1925 in Lausanne and is now buried with his wife Augusta in Cannes in France. Faberge's son Agathon and Eugene continued the business from small shops in Paris and London, but neither had their father's flair, and eventually the Faberge name, like so many other great historic companies, was purchased by a big conglomerate. Firstly by Unilever, the pharmaceutical company, and then by Pallinghurst, a gold and gemstone mining company who are its current owners and have recently started to launch a new collection under the Faberge name. After the revolution, 3 men were responsible for ensuring the legacy of the Faberge name, specifically his Easter egg collection. The first on the left is Armand Hammer. The son of Russian-speaking emigres to the USA, he spent almost a decade after the revolution in Russia purchasing art and collectibles from the Bolsheviks at knockdown prices. These included 10 of the Easter eggs, which he sold to wealthy US collectors, including the Pratts, the Posts and the Forbeses. He used the profits he made to invest in Occidental oil. The second, in the middle, is Malcolm Forbes, owner of Forbes magazine, who was an avid collector of arts and amassed a collection of 9 eggs over 40 years, including the Coronation, Lily of the Valley, Renaissance and the original 1885 egg. The third on the right is Victor Veskelberg, a Russian oligarch worth a reported $15 billion. He purchased the 9 Forbes eggs for $100 million in 2004 and has since amassed a collection of over 4,000 Russian decorative arts, which are now housed in the Links of Time Museum in St. Petersburg. These 3 men helped keep the Faberge story alive. People always ask where they are now. So as you can see, 50 were produced for the imperial family, excluding the 2 incomplete eggs from 1917. 10 are in the Kremlin Armoury, 13 in various museums throughout the USA, 9 in the Links of Time Museum in St. Petersburg, 3 belong to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth of England, 1 to Prince Albert of Monaco, 7 are in private collections, and 7 are still missing, whereabouts unknown. Or are they? As of 2013, there are no longer 7 missing. That number is now 6 due to an amazing discovery. Purchased by an antique dealer somewhere in the Midwest of America for $13,000, the egg sat in his shop window for several years, priced at around $15,000, without attracting a buyer. On the verge of scrapping the piece to recoup his investment, the dealer decided to do some research and found a clock inside the egg was made by Vacheron Constantin, one of history's greatest watchmaking companies. Realising he may have something of value, he sent a photo, the one you can see in the top left, of the egg sat next to his breakfast muffin, to Wartski's in London, the foremost authority on Faberge, and the company who handled the sale of many eggs for the Russians in the 1920s and 30s. Their expert got on the next plane and flew to inspect the piece, and after much research found it to be the 3rd Faberge creation, made in 1887 and missing since the Revolution. Its whereabouts since 1917 is a mystery, and it was only identified by studying black and white image above of Tsarina Alexandra's drawing room, featuring her egg collection. Just visible on the second shelf up is the egg in question. It was sold in 2015 for $33 million to an undisclosed collector. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you the greatest jeweller who ever lived, Peter Carl Faberge. Whilst the Faberge name is still making fine jewellery, unfortunately they have reverted to the style of Faberge's father, with pieces for the very wealthy. In fact, their store in St. Petersburg has a starting price of $250,000. Fortunately, the Faberge Foundation, set up to preserve the memory and quality of Faberge, allows a small number of companies to replicate Faberge's work. This includes pendants and charms copied from his original pieces, replicas of some of his Easter eggs, and a collection of Faberge's favoured diopside gems set into jewellery, all designed under the supervision of Princess Olga Romanov, the Tsar's granddaughter and cousin to the Queen. These pieces are displayed in the onboard boutiques now and for the rest of this cruise. If you have any further questions about Faberge, please see our Russian art specialist available through the onboard shops. Thank you.